good or bad, a lot of congressmen. It took him about 8 years to write this law. It took 66 rewrites, and he attended about 20 congressional hearings personally over those years. The law was signed into act by LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and it was signed 4 months after Sennheiser's death. So what about this thing called wilderness? If you think of it, everyone sort of probably has that personal feeling about what it was. But first we're going to take a look at, sort of that legal definition. We got, he spent 8 years on it. We've got to give it some airtime first. So. And maybe after you look at some of this, you'll understand why it took 8 years. So we're just going to explore just a little bit of the Act, mostly focusing on the definition and then what uses were intended in there. So some very eloquent language here, at least I think so, since I'm the choir leader here. Very specific. A wilderness in contrast with those areas where man and his works dominate the landscape is an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, and where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. And I underline that word untrammeled because that was very specifically sought out. It doesn't mean untrampled, it basically means unmanipulated or unhobbled. It's undeveloped land, retaining its primeval character without permanent improvements or human habitation. It appears to have been affected primarily by the forces of nature, with the imprint of man substantially unnoticeable. Can you imagine some of our current legislators trying to come up with that type of language? And from sort of the human connection piece here, it very explicitly says it also provides outstanding opportunities for solitude or a primitive and unconfined type of recreation. It also recognizes that wilderness may have other values, such as scenic, ecological, scientific, historic, educational. And the other part of the Act kind of gets into the different types of uses, but before we go there, just kind of thinking about, when you think about those uses, it's really framed by that first part of the Act. There's really 4 cornerstones or qualities in wilderness character. That's that untrammeled piece. Natural conditions prevail. It's undeveloped, and it also provides us outstanding opportunities for solitude. So just to remind everyone, the law basically says this is why we have a Wilderness Act. The agencies are responsible for managing it as wilderness and preserving that wilderness character. There's that phrase again. And it also recognizes it's devoted to different public purposes. Say that fast 3 times. Different public purposes. And then it gets into sections where really tries to outline the types of uses that are restricted or in some cases even prohibited. You know, this is the vision for what wilderness is. And it talks about commercial enterprises, no commercial enterprises or permanent roads. And commercial enterprises don't confuse those with commercial services. Remember when we talked about the development of the national parks, and you know, it was just an attraction for, you know, business people to go there and start developing tourism and services there. So this was intended to be a place where there was no enterprises, no infrastructure for those types of businesses. It also talks about roads. No temporary roads, no use of motor vehicles, motorized equipment or motorboats, or landing of aircraft, no other form of mechanical transport, and no structured installation within such area. This is that undeveloped character. And also recognizing that in designating wilderness, there may be a need to utilize some of those tools or concepts you saw on the previous slide. So it's very explicit, except as necessary to meet the minimum requirements for the management of the area as wilderness. And this is recognized in the designations. Grand Canyon wilderness. Just a quick slide on visitation there. You can see it starts at 1919. This is when it was designated. There was about 37,000 visitors. In 1920, that nearly doubled. It got up close to 500,000 and then dropped right around that recession period. I fast forwarded over here to about the time that Sennheiser was writing the Wilderness Act, and when it was passed, we were up to 1.5 million visitors at Grand Canyon National Park. And then the other circle up here, of course, is when I started there. The other in around 1987. And there was 3.5 million visitors. And here we are a little over 25 years later, and we reached 4.5. I think we're around 4.3 now or something like that. Oops.
Hey, Jack! Order here!
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Deputy. Say, what do you call that contraption out there? Tram car.
You see anything of it?
Around here we call it the dancing bucket.
I just had to throw that in there. He was really surprised. He goes, dancing bucket? What? Wilderness? So now we're going into quiz time. Just to get you warmed up a little bit about Grand Canyon Wilderness. It's a multiple choice. Was it 1980? 1993, any takers? 1996? We're running up, was that a yes, Brian? No. Or 2002? See, I knew you guys knew the answer to this. And it is a trick question, but those dates up there do actually have some meaning. Just a quick little outline. Another part of the Wilderness Act required the land management agencies to do an inventory and a study of national parks, national forests, to determine their suitability and eligibility for wilderness designation. And it actually said you had 5 years to do that. Grand Canyon started doing its homework pretty early on, 2 years after the act was started. It took about 10 years to come up with the first wilderness recommendation that went through a public process in 1976 and 1977. And it included 1 million acres of a 1.2 million acre park. The first, when it was ready to submit to the Secretary of Interior, Grand Canyon was also in the process of writing its first river management plan, Colorado River Management Plan, and they were asked to hold the wilderness recommendation until the plan came out, so that it was evident, that the park wanted to implement in the wilderness, including the river. The plan was completed and signed in 1980. It had a rewrite in 1982, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit through this river history because it's its own conversation, if you will. But that wilderness recommendation was submitted to the Department of Interior in 1980. And now the process is that the Secretary is to forward it to the President and then the President to Congress. But this did not happen in 1980. In 1993, we updated that wilderness recommendation, and essentially it was, the same wilderness recommendation, but we had new mapping tools, we had GIS, so we were able to refine the boundaries and things like that. And that was updated and resubmitted through the agency, but it actually somewhere got lost. Someone said, yeah, it went to the Department of Interior, but there's no record that it's there. And that was done in concert with our 1995 General Management Plan. And the reason 1996 was on the quiz is because there was a short, exciting moment in 1996 when Mr. Babbitt was the Secretary of Interior and was putting together a National Park Service wilderness bill. And so they asked Grand Canyon to submit their package that would have included the 1980 wilderness recommendation. But in the end, they decided to exclude that from the bill. It was a lot of work, and it was exciting for a short period of time, thinking about that. And then this other key piece, another piece of excitement, that in 2002, when we were updating our river management plan, there was an effort a request went to Secretary Norton to forward the wilderness recommendation for action. But it was very explicit in that request to not include the Colorado River. That was at the same time that we were updating the river management plan, and again, they decided they wanted to see what the park was going to propose. And we haven't heard anything since. So yeah, we don't have any legislation, but we do have our policies. That's also reflected in the act is, if you have suitable areas, then you need to have policies that speak to how you're going to manage your wilderness. So just the big picture of what has been designated. Again, about 1.1 million acres of the 1.2 million acre park. It's primarily all of the inner canyon, with the exception of the Cross Canyon corridor. The Bright Angel, South Kaibab, North Kaibab trails, the developed areas on the rim, of course, and then there's a non-wilderness road corridor leading up to the Two Week Ranger Station.